So would you now say that we have a situation in India, especially with the kind of regulatory framework that we have, the right to privacy exists thanks to the 2017 Puttaswamy judgment, but privacy as such doesn't exist anymore in India thanks to the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023. Would you agree with that kind of a characterization?
Okay, so I think it's not the first time where people's rights have been recognized in law, but in fact, on the ground, there are violations of it, right? So, in that sense, the right to privacy judgment in 2017 was very important because it clarified any doubt that the government had about whether or not it's a fundamental right. But in terms of actually honoring that right, I think there are lots of issues on a daily basis. And the privacy harms that we see, which I talk about in this paper, I don't think they're only a function of or a result of a weak Data Protection Act. I think the privacy harms have been there even if there had been a strong data protection law, say like the GDPR in Europe, the General Data Protection Regulation. Even then, I think, even in that context, I think there are some privacy harms that happen because of current practices of
Before you
corporations.
proceed with that, when I've been saying privacy, you've been saying privacy. Should we agree on one, or should we go with multiplicity of pronunciation?
We can pick whichever.
Tomatoes, privacy, privacy.
American versus British.
Okay, please go ahead. Yeah.
So I don't think the blame is only on the weak data protection law that was passed in 2023. I think the problem is bigger than that. And the fact that our Indian law is weak will only make matters worse than, say, GDPR. And more than that, the fact that this weak law is going to be implemented in the social context, such as India, where digital literacy is not very high, where law enforcement is not necessarily very good. I think the effectiveness, to the extent that the law has any teeth, even that will be made weaker in the Indian context. So the challenge, I think, is quite big in the Indian context. Also because I think even though things have changed quite a bit in the past 10 years, I don't know if you remember, but about 10, 12 years ago, people were saying, privacy is an elitist concern. It's not for ordinary people.
Even today, people say that privacy is a luxury good.
Yes. So in fact, that view is also in this paper. But I think prominent people would probably hesitate before they tweet something like privacy is a concern for the Netflix watching Indian public or wine and cheese public or something like that. I think that part, there has been some change. But still, I feel not just in India, but even more widely, the people need to understand better, appreciate better why privacy is important for human well-being.
Right. Speaking of this dominant consensus, which I talk about in my intro as well, this consensus says that data, including personal data, is an economic good that should be monetized for economic growth. Now, the people who make this argument and the kind of people they refer to for this argument, if you go back all the way, it leads to Silicon Valley, people like Elon Musk, and they like to talk about first principles, Let's argue from first principles. Now, what is the first principle here? As I understand it, privacy is a zone of existence which is protected from capture for whatever purpose, economic purpose, commercial purpose, and that zone is inalienable to every human being. Okay, now you have an economic system which one of the primary engines is AI, which is built on data mining. Data mining is central to this entire economy, and every segment of the economy is coming into this. So as an economist, do you agree with this consensus we have reached, so to speak, that mining personal data is okay because data is an economic good, and as an economic good, it should be subject to all economic processes.
So I don't know if it is a dominant consensus, but I think there are certainly some dominant voices that take this view. In fact, if you go to the Economic Survey of 2018-19, there is a chapter there called Data of the People, by the People, for the People. And it's really worth reading, because basically they say the marginal cost of storing data or harvesting data has crashed, and the marginal benefits from data have increased exponentially, and therefore data is a public good.
So marginal benefits, does it go to the public or does it go to a particular section? Because public good, there is no ambiguity about what is a public good. But these benefits, there is a lot to unpack there.
Correct. So this is the view they are taking, and I think it's a very problematic view because it's overly simplifying everything. The cost. For instance, there is no mention of the costs or to the environment from all these data centers, right? So, which is really a pretty serious concern now in America. Wherever data centers are coming up, local communities are resisting it and asking for them to not be open there, and in some cases even winning. So that cost is not even mentioned in the economic survey. And to the extent that they mention privacy being a concern when data mining happens, they say, this is an assumption we can make that all the data mining practices will be compliant or will be privacy respecting. This assumption is just pulled out of thin air. We have lots of examples of where tech companies have violated people's privacy rights. In the case of an app called Flow, which tracks women's menstruation cycles, they were sharing some private information and selling it to third party. There is a crisis text helpline where, for people who have mental health issues and they can reach out for help. Even they were caught, compromising or selling data.
So mental health is a context which involves the deepest of human experiences and feelings and emotions.
Correct.
Now, that is the quintessential, what should I say, the 0 degree of privacy, so to speak. It is at the heart of what you would start talking about when you talk about privacy. Now, even that is not protected from data harvesting, as you say. What kind of privacy protection regime are we talking about?
So see, the thing is that on the face of it, these apps or, helplines or whatever, generally, often it's through apps, but not necessarily. They say that, we will not do ABC, okay? But the fact is that after you have signed up for the app, once you've downloaded the app, first of all, very few people are reading the terms and conditions, right? Because it's too much of a bother and that document may not be easy to even comprehend. And, the key parts of it may actually be hidden on page 75 or something like that. So on the face of it, a lot of the apps or these products, they at least put a show of being privacy respecting. But the violations happen sometimes maybe even they are not aware of what they're doing. They may say upfront that, this data we will share. But it may seem like that is not personal data, right? That's the other distinction we have to make between data in general and personal data. So the economic survey, they don't really pay much attention to this. Data is also, how many buses does DTC run? That's also data. And if that data is shared publicly, there's no problem. Or sold. But if it is personal data, like who signed up, what was my PIN code, what was my location when I signed up for a mental health app, then you may on the face of it think it's okay if they have my PIN number. But the fact is that if my PIN number ends up with the data brokers, and then they have some other data sets that they have bought from elsewhere, then they can triangulate and they can unmask who this person is, who actually used the mental health app at a particular location at a particular time. So I think the way this market operates is very opaque.